From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
This message will self-destruct in 10 seconds.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, the final clue to an age-old mystery, the smoking gun in a case no one thought could be solved. Which player on the Washington Nationals sold their soul to win the World Series? Tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, celebrating the end of daylight savings time in a way that's just a little too giddy, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. I know I'm the only person in the known universe who likes it when it becomes dark and wintry and everyone's pissed off. And
me too.
Well, that's why I think we're married, is because everyone else hates our guts and calls us monsters, and everyone's like, I can't wait to turn back the clock. Said no one ever.
Oh my God, it's like it's heaven.
We walk around. We don't walk. We skip around. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Quite frankly, I just wish they would pick one and stick with it. Abolish, daylight savings time. It's ridiculous. However, I am hot all the time, and I don't like the summer.
I know me either.
I love cold, wintry, dark. And I know so many people suffer from seasonal affective disorder, and I feel very bad for them. And I know that, those lights that are supposed to replicate the sun probably aren't helpful. But, I can't really do anything about my seasonal affective disorder where I hate the summer because I can't blot out the sun. So I know you can't recreate the sun during the winter if you are one of those people that, is very affected by it. But I can't recreate winter when it's 110. And,
right.
The only saving grace is that typically we don't deal with a lot of humidity. But
right.
That's good. Yeah, most of the time. That actually can lead to problems which we'll get into, which actually also is part of this episode. And,
really?
Yeah. Not humidity, but you'll see what I mean. But I did want to take a moment and say thank you to Tipster Christina and Tipster. I don't know if her name is Kiki Leah, if it's all together, if it's Kiki Lee, it's our podcast name. But we got 2 great reviews this week, which are remarkably helpful. And Kiki taught me a new thing. It's AMSR. And she said I have an AMSR-like voice. And I was like, I hope that's good. I mean, it was a 5-star review, so it was good. But it's, and I don't have what it stands for because I'm an asshole.
No.
I didn't write it down, but it's, like comforting, like providing, like hearing a cat purr or something. It's something you youngsters say. Apparently a lot of people on YouTube say the AMSR
I hear it
thing
all the time too.
Yeah, I've never heard it. I was like, what's she saying? I have an AMSR voice?
Yeah. It stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response.
That's it, yes. Kindly like sending, like tingles up your spine, or it's hard for me to really understand it, but I am grateful, Kiki Lee or Kiki Leah, for your lovely review. It's the last several reviews are so kind and thoughtful and detailed. That I know that they're paying attention. The listeners are, these wonderful reviewers are paying attention, but they've all keep saying kind of the same thing, which is kind of, I'm like, how do I remedy this? It's like, I had no idea this podcast existed. How did I not know that? And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm trying hard to make sure people know it exists.
If you know it exists, would you please spread the word?
Would you tell everyone you know so that they know? It's funny, when people, it's like finding our tribe, and when people find it and they like it, they really like it. And if they don't, then they can hopefully just go away and not leave a shitty review. But the ones that find it are like, how did I not know this was here? And oh my God. And it's sweet and wonderful and somewhat daunting that we're, coming up on closing out our second full year and 106 episodes, 107 episodes, something like that. So it's interesting to me that people still can't find us, which means I have work to do. Hopefully someone will have the scales wiped from their eyes and they'll figure out that we're a diamond in the rough. But until then, we're plugging along doing this all by ourselves. So that's why reviews are really, really special to us and mean a lot. And I didn't even understand that reviews from other people help people who don't know about us find us until someone explained that. So if we have a Patreon account, if you want to support the care and feeding of this podcast, we would be very grateful for any, amount at all. Really terrific people are doing great things for us and helping us keep this going. But even if it's not in your budget, we are grateful if you tell anyone you know to listen to the podcast, or if you can take the time to give us a 5-star rating or even sit down and write a review. That's a priceless gift also. So we are really blessed that the people that do find us and listen are just remarkable human beings, intelligent, and write the most lovely reviews where I know they get it. They get it.
That is the thing. Our reviews are by people who get the podcast.
Yeah, they get it. And that's really it means a lot. It's not just like, I like this and listen, click. No, they're taking
we
the
take
time.
Those too. Don't get us wrong.
Yeah, we'll take that too. But they take the time to write the things that are in the podcast that they appreciate. And those are, it's like that, I guess, that scene in Avatar where it's like, I see you. I feel seen. I feel like I have been seen by some of the most beautiful eyes. And that's, or I feel like I've been heard by some of the most beautiful ears. I guess that's not as, like poetic sounding, but I'm grateful to you, Tip-Sters. So if you haven't left a rating or review, and if you feel compelled to do so, we'd be really grateful. So back to the humidity part. Producer Mark and I have had, I just can't even tell you how grateful I am that October's over. And it's like my favorite month. We got married in October. Halloween is in October. October was just fucking rotten for me and for producer Mark, although I don't know that he would say that, but he was like rushed into emergency surgery and shit caught fire and just
the fires were just, man.
It was October. Goodbye. I mean, I really can't wait for 2019 to just be in the fucking rearview mirror, as my beloved BFF Angela says. Everything in the rearview mirror there. So I'm going to be grateful when 2019's gone too. And it hasn't all been bad. It has been a amazing year for the podcast. So many fantastic vistas I have been able to see from where I am with law enforcement, with people that are open to being interviewed and sharing their stories. Just huge blessings. It's just been a shitload of boulders in the way, and
that's all it is. It's just
little boulders. Yeah. But sometimes I get tired of pushing them aside. That's all. It's no big deal, and we'll
all do, baby.
We'll push them aside. I just feel like everyone else has better coping skills than I do. Like, I fall apart when shit gets tough, and I can build myself back up. I'm tired of falling apart all the time, so I'm trying to develop better coping skills for things. But so most people within the sound of my voice, depending on where I guess you're from, know that California has been plagued with a really, really awful fire season. And October is typically, a big month for fires. It's usually hot and dry, and the Santa Ana winds arrive, making it really bad. And we have had humidity around anywhere from like 4 to 10%. One day during especially bad fires about a week ago, it was 2% humidity.
Yeah, it's not
which I love, except when it's hot and dry and everything is kindling. So yeah, I'm a big fan of low humidity, but that's it's actually too low. It's dangerously low. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again, and producer Mark will say it's wrong, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So we moved into our house.
It's wrong.
Wait till I get to the part where you think it's wrong. We moved into our house in October of 2007. It's the first house we have purchased, and we love it. And we'd been here about 5 days, and a really big bad fire started about 20 miles from us. And like most fires, caused by a human being, and not on purpose. This was a young kid who lived in a very rural area north of us who was playing with matches out on a Sunday in October and started a fire. It was hot and dry and windy, and I was teaching yoga in the San Fernando Valley, which is about 20 miles south of us. And I had left in the afternoon, and the fire, like I said, was about 20 miles away. I taught my 90-minute class. I came out, and the young girl at the front desk, Kate, she said, "Your husband's on the phone," and her face was white. And she wasn't like a manic panic kind of girl. She didn't do that. So I was like, "Oh, okay." And Mark was very calm and said, "So the sheriff's department came by and knocked on the door and said, turn the car facing out, get the leashes for the dogs. I have the cat in the cat carrier. He told me to put some, important papers in the car, pack a bag, and get ready to go." And I'm like, "All right." And the fire had moved 20 miles in 1 hour, and I was unaware of that. So I'm driving home, petrified, to the first house we've ever owned, the only house we've ever owned. And I get to the end of my street, and there's a sheriff's deputy checking driver's licenses. And we've been here 5 days. And of course, Mark Humphreys had gone to the DMV and changed his driver's license with his new address because he's him. And I would have done it who knows when, but sure not in the first 5 days. So all I have is my license with my old address, and I'm crying, and I'm showing the deputy my license out the window, and I'm like, "We just moved here. I live on this street, I swear." And he's like, "Just go on." He just waved me through, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God." So I get home, and Mark and I lay upstairs in our bed that night, looking out the second-story master bedroom window at what is now a huge shopping center with a Kohl's and a Target and a Lowe's.
That's
and
before it was built.
Exactly. Yeah. It was nothing. It was, a hillside, a hill.
Wouldn't have made it through that fire.
Oh.
Look, we felt like we were surrounded by a complete ring of fire. I mean,
yeah.
It really, really did.
36 houses in Camp Plenty, not far from us, burned. 36 houses were lost. And we laid and watched the fire burn along a ridge, basically parallel with the house, not coming toward us or going away from us, but just going right along the top of this ridge line in Placerita Canyon, for any of you locals. And after about a day and a half, 2 days, it had calmed down. And we thought, okay, we're okay. But I was like, what happens if we lose the only house we've ever owned? Everything we own is here. And I started to, after it calmed down, I started to unpack my bag. And Mark had taken like 2 drawers out of a filing cabinet with all of our important papers and put them in his trunk. He had really done an amazing job in a short period of time. So I started to unpack my bag that my husband had sweetly packed for me. And it contained 5 bras and 5 pairs of yoga pants.
No, it didn't.
It did.
It had dresses.
No, you said those were hung in your car. There were no dresses. There were no maxi dresses. I had 5 bras and 5 pairs of yoga pants. And all I could think was, what a hit I would have been at the shelter, parading around like a old broke down fat I Dream a Genie, like wearing. And it wasn't like your white and your beige bras, which I don't really have a lot of those anyway. It was the whore bras.
It was not.
It was the whore. I had a red one with gold lace.
Okay.
It was in the bag.
All right.
Some black bras.
It was not.
Some pairs of yoga pants. No underwear.
Of course I packed underwear.
No underwear. And I think what you had said is that you just started opening drawers and pulling stuff out, which makes sense. What do I have the most of? Bras and yoga pants. But it was just, I laughed for a long time, and he denies it. And he's like, "I know I packed you dresses." And I'm like,
I say it just like that.
And just
too.
like that, because you know how you talk like a crazy old witch. Yeah, he didn't do it. So anyway, just remember your old pal Melissa. If you ever end up in a shelter and I look like a whore, just know that it's because Mark packed my bag. I think the lesson here is don't let your husband pack your bag if you have to bug out. So anyway, what we're talking about today is pretty fucking fascinating. And it's been covered in some TV shows and a book by Joseph Wambaugh, who was a police sergeant with the LAPD and, a true crime writer. But in October of 1984, October 10th, in South Pasadena, in California here, a big fire broke out in a hardware store called Ole's Home Center. Now, I had never heard of this particular business, but producer Mark assures me it was a big, popular place, especially, Southern California, I think you said, Arizona,
yeah.
Utah?
Yeah, it was in the West. They had this is before all the big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot started taking over.
Right. But the thing I thought was so sweet is that you mentioned your father and your uncle used to buy all their things at their hardware needs at Ole's Home Center.
Yeah, we had one in Hacienda Heights when I was growing up, and that whenever they wanted to do landscaping or get hardware stuff, they would go to Ole's. And
your Uncle George is a landscape architect.
Yeah.
So Ole's Home Center probably came in very handy. So it was, a big hardware store that obviously carried lots of other things. It was called a home center because it carried lots of other things, which you'll hear as far as what started the fire. So on October 10th, a fire started in this Ole's Home Center, and the store was just completely decimated. It started a flashover fire, which just basically, combusts and then covers everything in its path. Only this time it wasn't just a store that had caught fire. It was the people inside that perished. And that's the murder part of this case. It's the case of John Leonard Orr, who was actually a fire chief for the Glendale Fire Department as well as an arson investigator. And in this particular fire he started, 4 people perished. A grandmother, her 2-year-old grandson, a 26-year-old mother of 2, thank God her kids weren't with her, and a 17-year-old employee. And the next day, after the fire is extinguished, arson investigators from around all of Southern California, San Diego County, Riverside County, LA County, they all converge at the store, which is basically nothing. And they say, oh, this is an electrical fire. And one arson investigator, John Orr, who is the fire chief of the Glendale Fire Department, says, no, this is arson.
He did?
You're not looking close. This is arson. This is not an electrical fire. And, the group had decided it was, and yet he insists that it's not, which it's to his own detriment later on. Yeah, that's
crazy.
Well, it's to his own detriment later on because he killed 4 people. So he insists it's arson, and they finally go, you know what? I think he's right. And they find that many stores, small stores around the Southern California area, were being set fire to with an unusual, simple, and ridiculous modus operandi, which is to use sort of a really, rudimentary, rustic, incendiary timing device. It's a lit cigarette, 3 matches wrapped in yellow lined writing paper, like a legal pad, secured by a rubber band. He would light the cigarette, allow it to burn down, catching his incendiary device on fire. And then he would go set small fires in a grassy hill area so that firefighters were drawn to the grassy hill area and then, in more like congested areas. And then they would come and put out the fire at a home goods store, a store with, it was smart in the way that he would put this incendiary device in bedding, mattresses, pillows, comforters, somewhere in a department of that in a store where that's going to catch fire. So he became known as the Pillow Pyro by arson investigators.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very, it was, kind of a sad, yet whimsical name for someone who sets fires to stores and ends up taking 4 people's lives. But throughout the 80s and 90s, there were so many fires in Southern California that were just unexplained. And you can say, weather conditions, homeless encampments, but when every small hillside in Southern California is catching fire, there's something going on.
So it was just a ton of fires going.
A ton of small fires. They actually, some of them turned big because you couldn't control them all, and caused millions of dollars worth of damage and destruction in Southern California in the 80s and 90s, mid to late 80s through early 90s. So in January of 1987, there's a convention for arson investigators in all around Southern California, but it's being held in Fresno. So during the convention, several fires are started in Bakersfield.
Right down the road.
So yeah, I guess he maybe, during the coffee breaks, he would go out and start a fire and then come back and be like, "Hey, Bob, how you doing?" And it's weird because they are sort of set with this strange incendiary device, this piece of notebook paper. And there's, wrapped around matches with a rubber band. There's one piece of notebook paper that was left, and it had a unmatched fingerprint on this piece of paper. So the captain of the Bakersfield Fire Department, Captain Marvin Casey, keeps this, and he thinks, I think someone from Southern California, particularly Los Angeles, is starting these fires, and I think it's a fire investigator. So we now are in March of 1989. And there is another arson convention of investigators in Pacific Grove, California, which is more northern California. So March of 1989, this group of fire investigators are having their convention, and I'll be darned, the hillsides of Pacific Grove are catching fire at a rapid rate.
Really?
Yeah. Now, Captain Casey is also at this convention, and he's like, look, he will not give it up. He won't give it up. So he makes a list of who was in Bakersfield at the time of all the fires, who was in Pacific Grove at the time of all the fires, and he narrows it down to a short list of 10 people, and John Orr is on the list. But everyone on that list is cleared of suspicion when their fingerprints are compared with the fingerprint that Casey found on the piece of notebook paper in Bakersfield. So Captain Casey insists that everyone be, checked and rechecked. And someone from the sheriff's department of LA County said, your arson investigators need to calm down and back off and keep off of this evidence because it was touched by John Orr. We got his left ring finger off of that piece of paper. So the sheriff's deputy is thinking John Orr touched the evidence when actually the evidence was touched by John Orr before it was collected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was bungled. Let's just call it what it is. It's bungled. And it's one of those things that makes you remember no one can be above, suspicion in something like this. Unfortunately, some people, and we are really blessed to have such great firefighters in Southern California, but some people who are firefighters are also fire starters. They're the most competent people who start arson fires because that's what they do. I mean, I'm not saying every fire person is a firebug, but it's, it just isn't, you can't, when a fire is started and someone is there right away at every fire before anyone else, maybe just take a look is all I'm saying. Keep an open mind if you're investigating fires that everyone could be a suspect. I sound like a really bad episode of Murder, She Wrote, but I can't help it. I feel like it took so long to catch him because he was good at what he did and he was beyond reproach. He was the fire captain of the Glendale, fire department, and and a really bad man who, didn't mind. I don't think he set out to kill 4 people. I don't think he set out to kill anyone.
Well, of course not. That's the
But
difference.
he did.
Right. He's a murderer, but he's not unlike other murderers. He's not thinking, oh, I'm out to kill anybody.
That's exactly why I think this case is interesting, because I typically am very black and white, and a murderer is a murderer is a murderer. And there are reasons, our beloved Lieutenant Kenda would say there's 3 reasons to kill someone: sex, money, and revenge. And I thought at first, oh, he's so full of shit. But then I went through the list of reasons to kill someone and thought, oh, no matter how I slice it, pretty much comes under all those 3 categories. You can say, well, what about this? No, that's more revenge. Well, what about, no, that's sex. That's, or money. So most arsonists fall under the category of revenge. They want revenge against usually something like a large conglomerate, a business, a corporation, not like I want revenge against humanity. But it's a interesting mindset. It's a fascinating mindset, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this Captain Casey is just not going to give up. And he keeps looking, and he keeps bothering the ATF. And he keeps saying, please take a look, take another look. 3 years later, when technology advances, the ATF finds a fingerprint on an old LA County database that contains John Orr's fingerprint, because he had applied decades earlier to become an LAPD officer.
Oh.
He had failed the exam, and he was traumatized that he couldn't become a cop. I don't know what part of the exam he failed. I'm going to guess it was the psych part.
You think?
I'm thinking. And he then becomes a firefighter. And they found 20 years later an application with his fingerprint on it, and it matches. And Captain Casey finally says, look, I think this fingerprint that was on this piece of paper belongs to John Orr, and it was there. It wasn't because he touched the evidence. So they don't just come down, with the letter of the law on him. They put a tracking device on his personal car, and he finds that one, and I guess gets rid of it. But he didn't know that they had put a tracking device on his city-issued car. So they follow him. And in December of 1991, while following his car, they find him at the site of a fire, and they arrest him there. A federal grand jury indicts him because he was standing there at this fire on December 4th of 1991. The federal court convicts him in 1992 of 3 counts of arson, and the judge in this case sentences him to 30 years in prison. He keeps maintaining his innocence, and one of the things that was found in his home during a search is his unpublished book, Point of Origin.
Oh.
Now, he wrote the book and said it's complete fiction, and it's basically his life story. He plays 2 parts. He plays an arson investigator, and he plays a firefighter named Aaron Stiles, which is an anagram for I Lit LA Arson.
Really?
Yeah. So he plays, it's both sides of his personality. It's a head investigator and a fireman who sets fires. And Aaron Stiles, the protagonist who sets fires, has really badly written quotes like, I found a friend in the fire.
Oh.
Yeah. So he has friends that he has in flames, which is really...
Right.
Yeah, that's a pretty good description. He made the mistake of setting a fire in a hardware store that killed 4 people.
Oh, Aaron did?
Yeah.
In the book?
In the book.
Uh-huh.
And as producer Mark wanted me to point out, it's a novel, but I think we know it's more of a autobiography. Mm-hmm. So in the novel Point of Origin, the lead character, Aaron, sets a fire in a hardware store, and 4 people die. and one of them is 3 years old as opposed to 2.5, and his name is Matthew, which is also the name of the young boy who died at an Ole's hardware store.
Great.
So he can't think too far out of his box because,
Not really clever.
Right.
No.
I will tell you that the book is available on Amazon, and...
Wait, it was published?
It was published by someone, but let me explain. I need to find out for sure because I don't trust anyone anymore, but they say that the proceeds go to the family members of victims of all the fires. I don't know that I believe it, but they say...
Yeah, I remember there was a law in California that said that
you can't gain like John Wayne Gacy's clown paintings.
Right.
Any money from your quote unquote artistic endeavors as a murderer has to be diverted to your victims. So I know that's true. I just don't know about a self-published or a someone published book on Amazon.
Right. I don't remember if that law was challenged or I can't remember, but
I don't think so. I think you still can't. I mean, let's face it, incarcerated people get money one way or another, whether it's, your girlfriend comes for your conjugal visit and keisters $1,000 up her butthole. I don't know how people get money, but you get things in. I saw a video that I laughed until I hurt myself and then realized this is the new world, where an inmate ordered pot that was delivered by drone and dropped into the courtyard of the prison.
The prison, right.
Yeah. So, and he got his pot delivered via drone. So I think criminals are always going to find a way. The thing about a lot of criminals is that they're really smart. And if they used their powers for good, the world would be such a much better place. I mean, every time I go to buy Claritin D at Costco, I'm just riddled with resentment and anger because I used to get Claritin D via prescription and I would get 30 pills for $10. I'd have a month's worth of Claritin D for a fucking 10 spot. And now I have to scrimp and save and try and find, the cheapest place to get it and save coupons. And then I can only go every 2 weeks because fucking Walter White and a group of blue Smurfs in the desert make fucking meth out of my Claritin D. Now, if you're smart enough to make meth out of my motherfucking allergy meds, cure cancer, you fuckface. Do something good with your life. I mean, I'm sure there's, flame has an amazing use for a lot of things. And if you're smart enough to figure out how to do a timed incendiary device with a goddamn cigarette and some fucking matches and a piece of yellow legal pad, you can probably come up with something even more ingenious that might help humanity. Okay.
Well said.
I'll shut up now. Okay. So
can't disagree with that.
He's given his first sentence is he's given 30 years in prison for the 3 counts of arson that they caught him on. And he keeps saying, I'm innocent. And then it takes a few more years to find out he's the Ole's hardware murderer.
I'm sure that the manuscript of the book helped them track that down.
Potentially.
Yeah, I think so.
And a few years later, he is then convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder from the 1984 hardware store fire and given special circumstances and a 25-count indictment. So the jury deadlocked on only one of the 25 counts. And finally, the prosecution's like, all right, look, we'll dismiss that one. Can we get on? And they do convict him on 24 counts of his indictment. And they still deadlock on whether to give him the death penalty. And finally, the judge is like, fine. The jury is split 8-4 in favor of, him getting the death penalty. And the judge says, fine, life plus 20 years without the possibility of parole.
Well, that kind of seals the deal.
Yeah. And he was in San Quentin, but he is now at the California State Prison in Centinela, which producer Mark tells me is in the Imperial Valley, I guess it is.
It's in the city of Imperial, which is hell. It's hell, California. It's miserable down there. It's just hot and Nothing out there but agricultural stuff and heat all the time.
And don't you think that's what he deserves?
I think it's very appropriate.
I think that's what he needs to be in hell, California.
Yeah.
Very much in hell. So what is the mindset of someone who sets fires? We talked about the fact that, is it in 2019, the mental health world is still debating whether it's a criminal offense or a mental illness. And I don't really care. At this moment, I don't care. I'm not saying you should, be handled with kid gloves because you start fires and you're mentally ill. I'm saying you need to be out of society. I don't care if you need your meds adjusted or what. I don't care. But if you kill people with your mental illness, it's no longer a mental illness. It's a crime in my book. And it's very fascinating that, they have often said, those who know more than I, that fire starters have a sexual dysfunction, that they, have a sexual experience while starting fires. Fires are fascinating, interesting to look at, needed for warmth, but I've never, been like that interested in, aroused by a fire. It can also, the people who start fires could have had, problems as juveniles, like animal cruelty, those kind of things. I still believe in the McDonald triad. You can say it's old-fashioned. I don't care. But, fire starting, bedwetting, and animal cruelty, I don't think you're going to grow up to be like a stellar human. I think you're going to have some shit going on. And, whether you need help, I don't care. Get help. But don't kill people and set fires and hurt animals. Just I don't care if you pee your bed. Have your parents buy all the mattresses, that they can afford. But don't do the other shit. And if you feel yourself wanting to do the other shit, please get help. Talk to someone. Please talk to someone. Preferably not the captain of a fire department, because they could be just crazy. So an FBI criminal profiler thinks that John Leonard Orr was possibly one of the worst American serial arsonists of the 20th century. They believe he set close to 2,000 fires between 1984 and 1991.
2,000?
2,000 fires.
Holy shit.
And there's been estimates by arson investigators that after his arrest, the number of brush fires from nearby foothill areas has decreased 90%.
So he was a one-man,
He really was.
Oh, my God.
A one-man band. His daughter, Lori, who is now a motivational speaker, testified on behalf of the defense at his trial. And her testimony, they say, really prevented him from receiving the death penalty. But she was convinced of her father's innocence at the time. And now she believes he's guilty. And she has broke off all contact with him. And she's one of the reasons that he didn't get the death penalty, which, in my mind, wouldn't have been such a bad thing. Maybe, have him set fire to. So Timothy Huff, who's a retired FBI analyst who specialized in arsonists and bombing cases, said that, these revenge, extremist beliefs, monetary gain, even just for the desire of excitement, those are the things that propel arsonists to do what they do. Those are the most common things. And unfortunately, the most sophisticated arsonists are frequently firefighters. So I love firefighters, don't get me wrong, but if you know of a firefighter who's a little sketchy, just, keep an eye out for him. I'm not saying you put like a tracking device on their car, but maybe you do. And more cowbell.
If you'd like to support the podcast, we'd love it if you do. Go to patreon.com/Just the Tip-Sters.